ladies and gentlemen, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thorgy, and I've been wanting to make this video for weeks now. I, like everyone else out there, have many thoughts about Street Fighter V, and I've been wanting to talk about them for the longest time, so I took my time and wrote down every single thing I wanted to say until I could get it just right, and after all this time, I'm finally ready to say my... Hello everyone, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thorgy, your guide to all things geeky, and this is another episode of Game Room, the show every single Thursday-ish on this channel where we come out and talk about video games and just have us a good old geek out session. And today, I'm getting old. Dear God, you know you're getting old when you pull something doing a pratfall, alright? But yes, today I had many things that I wanted to discuss. I wanted to finally talk about Street Fighter V, someone requested that I do a Pokken review, and none of that mattered because when I woke up this morning, the internet just exploded a big old pile of Final Fantasy 15 updates in my face. That sounded really dirty. But alright, before we get into all the news that just dropped about Final Fantasy 15, let me give you a little bit of my history with this franchise. I'm a huge fan of Final Fantasy. I've played numerous games in that franchise, and I've loved almost every single one of them. You know the one I'm talking about. But I have been a little bit concerned for Final Fantasy 15. Partly because it's following directly on the heels of that game. Yep. And also because this game was announced a decade ago. It was that long ago. And, yeah, the video game industry does not have a good track record of having games that get delayed for a decade and then putting out something great. But today, they didn't just announce the release date, which is going to be September 30th. They also announced that in addition to being a video game, Final Fantasy 15 will have a 5-part anime series prequel, and it will also have a full-length CGI movie tie-in. Okay. Everybody I know is getting super excited about this. I'm gonna be that one asshole who comes in and rains on the parade. Okay, first off, the positive is that this explains why it took them a decade to get this out. They had other stuff that they were working on, alright? They wanted this to be a big, huge drop. And indeed it will be. This is a lot. Here's my thing. After Final Fantasy 13, and 13-2, and 13-3, and I'll be totally honest with you guys, 10-2 as well, they have not had the best track record lately with me. And also, we've all heard the news about how Final Fantasy VII is going to be split into multiple parts, and that was to the excitement of nobody. I've become a little bit hesitant of Square Enix. Don't get me wrong, if this was like 15 years ago, when we just came off of Final Fantasy VII, 8, 9, and 10, it was like, oh my gosh, all these games are just mind-blowing, way to go, these are some of the best RPGs of all time. And then they came out and said, hey man, the next one, it's not just going to be a full-length game, it's also going to be a TV series, and it's also going to be a movie. I'd be losing my mind. However, this ain't 15 years ago, brother. So I kind of have a fear that this TV series and this movie is them kind of coming in and going, okay, listen, people, they weren't happy with our last couple of games. We gotta do something to make up for that. We gotta give them something, and I would rather just have had a really great video game. And I'm not saying that Final Fantasy 15 will not be a great video game. I think that it does look really cool. I have a couple of problems with it, such as the fact that it looks like your party throughout the entire game is going to be really small, which to me is not the Final Fantasy game. But the world looks awesome, it looks huge, spacious. I love how they're incorporating monsters into this highly technological society, and also the way in which you can kind of move around and even like the cover mechanics that they're throwing in there. So yeah, a lot of the gameplay mechanics that I'm seeing in there actually do look pretty good too. However, and I know this is going to sound incredibly weird, I feel like they just needed to put out a really good video game first. Then I would have been far happier seeing like the additional stuff come later, or you know, putting out a really good video game and then pausing, and then in the next video game, then you can put out all that stuff. You needed to do something to kind of regain my trust, before you could come in and go, oh, and this next game is going to have all this additional stuff, because it does kind of remind me of Final Fantasy 13, which we all played it, and we were like, yeah, it's fine, I guess. And they were like, it's fine, you say? That's a thumb up to us. Here's the sequel. Here's another sequel after you didn't really care about that previous sequel. Come on, it's all being thrown at you. And it's like, guys, you don't have to create big, giant franchises around every single thing that you put out. I know I am probably alone in this, but it also makes me concerned because one of my biggest problems with Final Fantasy 13 was the story. And the fact that you didn't know what the hell was going on in that game. The only way that you knew what was going on in Final Fantasy 13 is if you stopped and read every single little text box that popped up in your menu screen, not even in the story. Nobody even just stopped and tried to tell you what was happening. You had to go and read a textbook located within the game to figure out what the heck was happening in the game itself. And I'm sorry, but that's just not a good way to tell a story in a video game. And we have this prequel coming out. There's going to be 5 anime episodes. And I watched the first one, and it was okay. You know, it's the story of Sasuke Uchiha and his shoujo boy band traveling across the country from one tour date to another. I think that's what it was about. Tell me that's not what it was about. Come on. So I watched that and I was like, okay, this is actually pretty interesting. The action looks pretty darn cool. If that's how the gameplay is going to go down, then alright, I think that's going to be kind of fun. But then it starts getting into all the political stuff and the royal family. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Did I need to play the demo to understand this? Did I need to read stuff outside of this to understand that? Because if this is a prequel for the game, and it's coming out before the game, I shouldn't have to play the game to understand it, should I? So I'm worried that if I didn't understand that, then I'm really not going to understand the video game. And also, they have a full-length CG movie coming out. And I'm one of those few people out there who actually did like the Spirits Within. I almost said Advent Children, but a lot of people like that one. Spirits Within. I'm one of the few people out there who actually did like that. It was not in any way, shape, or form a Final Fantasy movie, other than the fact that there was some dude in there named Sid. But I actually did enjoy it. So I'm not going to come out and poo-poo the idea of a CG movie. And a lot of people out there loved Advent Children, and this is being made by a couple of people who worked on it, so I have faith that it's going to be good. But it tells the story of the protagonist's father after the protagonist leaves for this giant cross-country road trip. And it's going to be the story of what happens to him. And here's the thing. If you want to do that to build the universe, that's awesome. Like, you want to give him this big, great storyline that will then, at some point, the king will pop back up and he'll make some vague reference to it, but you didn't really actually have to watch it, but it makes it a cooler experience if you did, then alright, that's fine. However, if I'm playing the video game and I haven't seen the movie yet, and then all of a sudden the king pops back up and he reveals something to me, and the only way I'm going to understand it is if I've seen the movie, then that's a problem. And that's my big concern with this announcement about the anime prequel and about the movie, is that this does remind me of how they told the story in Final Fantasy 13, which you did have to see stuff outside of the main game to understand what the heck was happening in the main game. And that's not just with Final Fantasy 13, that's kind of been the trend with all Final Fantasy games, is that Final Fantasy, you know, it was known for having these big, giant, epic storylines, but over the past couple of installments, big, giant, and epic slowly turned into complicated. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having a really complex storyline, but there's a difference between complex and complicated. I mean, think about it. Final Fantasy VII, there's this dude, he wants to summon down a meteor, you gotta stop him. Final Fantasy VIII, there's a witch out there, she's controlling time, you gotta stop her. Final Fantasy IX, save the princess. Final Fantasy X, there's a giant monster out there, you gotta stop it. And there's a ghost city, and your dad disappeared. Okay, getting a little bit more complicated, but you can understand it. Final Fantasy XII. I love Final Fantasy XII. I cannot remember for the life of me what the story of that game was. And Final Fantasy XIII, I ain't even gonna try with that one, alright? Let alone Final Fantasy XIII-2 and Final Fantasy Lightning Returns, which, oh my god, I got nosebleeds just reading the Wikipedia summary of that game. So, I have a concern that these prequels and this movie, it's not going to be additional stuff. It's not going to be world building stuff, which it should be. That could be awesome. If you put out there a great game and you make this just a world building experience, then alright, cool. Like I said earlier in this video, I would have preferred it if we just got a flat out good Final Fantasy game first, then with Final Fantasy 16 you came in and went, okay, you like that last one, time to build a really big world. I think that would be great. But even if they want to do it with this one, and they just want to do it to build the world, it's like, okay, that sounds really cool. But if you're going to come in here and go, yeah, in order to understand this plot line of this $60 video game that you just bought, you also have to buy a $15 movie ticket to go and see this movie, I'm gonna call so much BS on this. And I know there's a lot of people out there getting upset with me right now because A, they have not said whether or not this movie is coming to theaters or whether or not it will just be some home release, so we don't know that yet. And there's no clues whether or not it will actually be one or the other, so I'm not going to come in here and make assumptions. But for everybody who's getting upset at me coming in here and saying, oh, you're gonna have to watch this movie to understand it, I don't know if it's true, but what I'm saying is, before we all get excited about this, just realize that is what we've been seeing from the Final Fantasy games for a while now. So I would not be shocked if that's the move that they pull. If it's not, and this is just a world building thing, awesome. I will be the first person to come in here and praise this decision, as long as the game is also good, and I will be super excited to see other video game franchises out there try and pull stuff like this in order to create bigger and deeper and richer worlds. I'm sorry, I'm getting choked up over all this. It's just so beautiful, man. However, if this is just another weird ploy to try and get people to invest more time and money into these weird complex storylines, guys, that's the last thing that Final Fantasy needs right now. But okay, I'm very sorry for coming in here and being the big bummer. Typically, I am very positive. You guys know that. You've watched the other shows on this channel. You know that I am super positive about almost everything that I talk about. Don't watch that review. No, that's everything else. I am super positive on this channel. So I know that it seems out of character for me to come in here and be this concerned, but, you know, I feel like nobody else was saying this, and this was a fear I had in the back of my mind. So, I'm sorry, I just had to get it out there. But let me know in the comments down below, how do you feel about all these announcements that they just made about Final Fantasy 15? Are you excited for the anime? Like I said, the first episode is out now. I watched it. It actually looks pretty darn cool. Aside from the fact that every single character in that cast looks like you just went down the dating sim checklist of characters, alright? But aside from that, it does look really cool to me. And the trailer for the movie, I'll admit, I didn't understand a damn thing happening in that, but it did look cool. So, let me know in the comments down below how you felt about both those things. And if you want to see some more fun, geeky stuff from me, well, like I said, we have Game Room here every single Thursday, or sometimes Friday. And then we have reviews over the weekend, and we've got Comic Class, where we just geek out about comic books on Wednesdays. We have a lot of shows on this channel for all your geeky needs. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, and come back later, and click on some of the videos at the end of this. Thank you very much. Come back next time.